Welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we build Django apps. And we're going to continue on my Django application, my homeschool application that I've been working on for, well, a long time now. That's what the project that we use as the demonstration of this. The whole point is to show you how Django apps work. Tonight we're going to go and begin on a new feature on the application. So you can ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. And then we'll just get going. I do want to say thanks to Franz, the new patron that I have on Patreon. If you want to support me, you can. You can go to patreon.com/mblehman and join others there and help me stay motivated. Keep working on this stuff. It really helps out a lot. All right, so here's our repository, the homeschool repository. And the application is at theschooldesc.app if you want to go check it out. But we're going to look at the issues list, and we're going to look at a new feature that was requested by a customer. And this is the basic requirements that the customer wanted for this feature. She was looking for the ability to have a checklist for herself. So let's start up the application, hopefully with more luck than the last time we did this. The last time we went deep down a rabbit hole on how to do brew, and I'm hoping not to do that again because that was painful, but it was necessary. So we're going to start up the web application server and go check it out in the browser. That should have opened up a tab, but it did not. So let's do this over here. Maybe it opened up in a different window. I don't know. So we need to log in with my test user, and my test user is testing at somewhere.com, I think. This is all local data on my local development database, so there's nothing, I'm not showing off anything super fancy here. And, well, fascinating. We're at this point where I've now reached another year of development on this, and so we might have to create a school year first. So I have a new school year that kicked in as starting on June 1st of 2022 in my development data, and we need to populate it with a little bit of stuff before we can actually see what's going on. So let's walk through some of that. We're going to create a grade level, and let's do 4th grade. That's what one of my kids is in this year. And so now we have a school year. And in our school year, let's add a course. Let's do, my son is doing some programming with me. So let's call it programming, sure. And that won't run every day, but well, I'll leave it for this course in reality, or for our test data. Bella, welcome. Thanks for joining in. Hopefully, I appreciate you checking it out, even if it's late for you, and I do have all the recordings up if you're not able to catch them. So, but if you have any questions, let me know. So let's populate this course with a couple of tasks for now, and for the sake of it, we'll do something that we can replicate a bunch of times. So, Python book. I'm teaching my son some Python. He is a 4th grader. We're going over a kid's Python book, and we want to replicate it. Let's say replicate it 10 times. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. We just need a little bit of data. And we can start, we don't need to number each task. So that should create these 10 tasks for us for this. And we'll go back to the grade and add a second course. I'm trying to get to a point where there's enough to see in the school year so you get a sense of what's going to be there. My kids do math, so we'll have a math class. And then I'll just call this one, we'll not repeat this one, we'll just do lesson 1. And then let's add another school year, again, just to flesh out the example, or sorry, another grade level, I misspoke. So my other child is in 2nd grade, so we're going to have 4th grade and 2nd grade, and she does science. They do other non-STEM stuff too, but hey, I'm a programmer, so we're going to use some kind of more STEM-related courses. We'll say she's learning physics. How about that? She's not, but it's okay. So that's going to be the task there. And one more to round it out. I don't know. We'll have some reading. That's normal. There's a lot of reading in my household. Read a book. Read from a book. We'll repeat it, let's say, 10 times. So now we've got a couple of courses, a couple of grade levels, and if we go back to the week view, I guess we need some students enrolled. I'm forgetting my own process here. So we need to enroll, let's see, we're going to enroll Mark in 4th grade. And so now we've got Mark in there. Let's also go into the students area and enroll Faye into 2nd grade. It's kind of fun using my application as an actual user. I don't do this much. So here we go. We've got these 2 kids as those grades. And if we go back to the week, now we've got more of a complete picture of the week. All right, so what was the user requesting? The user wanted to see her schedule in a view that is actually useful for her. She phrased it as a teacher checklist. So there are some courses that that this particular mom needs to prepare for her kids' work. And so she kind of has homework on her kids' tasks. And so she wants an ability to have a list of here are all of the activities for the whole week so that then she can go through and cross off and make notes about what she needs to do. And she didn't give me a lot of details beyond that. She did say that she didn't need to look at all of the courses, so there will ultimately need to be some kind of feature to toggle certain courses on or off. And so that's something we'll consider. Bella, let me take a look at your comment here. Okay. Doing some school-related stuff. Well, I'm hopeful that it's useful to you. We kind of just explore the ins and outs of being a real app, which is something that the basic tutorials that you get out there they're useful. Don't get me wrong, but they miss certain layers that when you're building a full application, that I hope that this point of view provides additional on top of that. Oluwasiyi. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Oluwasiyi. Welcome. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. I'm trying. If you have any questions, let me know. Happy to answer them. So let's think about what we're going to put in this feature or how we design the feature. And maybe probably my thought process about what I need to do for a feature. So whenever I'm considering a new feature for our Django application, I generally start at the data that I'm going to need to make the feature successful. So the modeling. So Django has models, and I think that is a useful place to kind of frame yourself into like what's actually relevant to solve the particular need for a project. And in this case, for this checklist, Mirage, welcome. For this checklist feature, there's not a lot of new data here. Like when we were looking at this, we're already working from a lot of preset data that's already available. So we have a week view already. That is the view that she wants to be able to see. So it's basically all the data that you see on this page is going to be recycled for this new view that we're going to create, which is convenient. The thing that's not captured, though, is this ability to filter out certain courses. So we can kind of take this project and this approach in 2 passes. The very basic version of this, and the thing that I can deliver and push out to my actual website so that I can get some feedback from my user, is a version that doesn't do any filtering of any kind. And I know she said she wanted the ability to turn stuff on and off, but I'm going to guess that having a checklist of any kind is going to offer some value immediately. And I think that's a good, healthy way to approach to think about applications too. So some people call this minimum viable product, or there are other terms out there, but this idea that deliver quickly, deliver incrementally, and in these small steps so that you can get something out there that your users can start using. The other benefit of doing that is she'll be able to tell me like, hey, actually, you know what, now that I'm using this, even though I don't have my filtering ability, I could also see myself needing this and needing that. So the earlier you can collect that feedback and those requirements, you'll be better off. So I think what we're going to do is focus not so much on the removal part right now. So that will be some data model that, I know a moment ago I just said consider the data model first, and I think we can do the data model, but we can also defer it, knowing that that piece is not required for this first pass, since we already have all of this other data that is already pre-existing. So we can make a version of this that is a checklist. We can kind of put in the right location for the buttons that's going to be aesthetically appealing, all of that kind of stuff. Get a version out there, start collecting feedback from the user, and then move on to the next bit, which is going to be that filtering stuff that she's going to be looking for. So let's do that. Let's just jump into it and figure out what kind of buttons and stuff we want to do and how this is going to look. I think, to me, as I'm evaluating this page, and I've seen, my wife is also a user of this application. This is not my wife's request. This is actually a separate customer. These pages can get long, which is fine, but there's not a lot of buttons on here. And in fact, there's only this, well, that's not totally true. There's links up here that can make you navigate to between the weeks, and then most of these things that are text are actually clickable, just about all of them. But there's only this singular button. And so it feels like the right place for me to put a button, another button next to it, which will be the teacher checklist. So I think I want to think about this from like a design point of view first, to make sure that I'm happy with how that's going to look, and then we can put it in there, flush it in there with just the HTML that's not powered by anything, that no links will go anywhere, and then continue on with the actual the Django view and the template to make the view work like we want to. So let's start, I guess, with the icons. Sure, why not? So we have a print icon here, and the pattern, the language pattern that I like to put in for a lot of my buttons in my app is to have some kind of SVG icon along with some of the more important actions that you can see. So all of the stuff at the bar at the top has icons. Print has an icon. There's a settings icon over here. So it just feels nice and inviting, I think, to do that. I have to remember, though, which icon set that I use. So there are a couple that I reach for. One is called Zondicons, and both of these icon sets are from the same individual. The other one is called Heroicons. And they're both from someone named Steve Shoger, I believe, is the person who did this project. Yep. Steve is one of the people behind the Tailwind CSS project and is a very talented designer, and he makes these things available for free, which is pretty amazing. I think that I use the Zondicons set, which he's not updated in many years, but it's a pretty full set that has what I want. So let me first confirm that this is in fact what I'm after, and then we'll look through that. So I think one way I can do this is I can edit. I have a directory here. Zondicons. Oh man. Oh, it's in my downloads. Zondicons? Yeah, okay. I've downloaded all of these SVGs so that I don't have to go get them from the website. But I like to use the website first as an easy reference point to see them, and then I can go and come in here and pull the SVG files once I've found the icon that I want. So for a checklist, let's think about what the right choice is. Now, I don't like to deviate from excuse me, accepted patterns that are out there on the internet. If you have an open icon or some kind of folder, I mean, you can see in my selections, I have a printer by the print button. So I like to lean on well-established icon names and patterns so that it breeds familiarity for my users immediately. If I was picking like odd icon selections, I think what that will do is, while it could make your website seem unique, it could also at the same time give mixed messages to your customers. So this is one area where I don't think it pays to be creative, I guess is the point I'm trying to get at. So a checklist to me seems like I don't want to use a clipboard because that's going to convey like copying. So we can look for some kind of check marks, or we'll browse through and see what are decent candidates, and then we'll come back and make a selection. None of these look, maybe a bookmark kind of thing. Nah, that's a stretch. So there is the most obvious choice is a check. Like if I'm going to call it a teacher checklist, a check mark might be very on the nose. And that's okay. Like that might be the best fit. But I want to give, there's not that many of them, so we'll give them their due look. And hopefully the scrolling is not too fast for streaming. Inbox check? Nah, that's too esoteric. Trying to key in specifically on things that look like checkboxes or are going to incorporate some sort of check. And this does not have a check, so that's clearly like pasting. That clipboard would not be a good fit anyway. Okay, getting towards the end. And I'm not seeing anything that's jumping out at me that would be a different candidate. All right, cool. Checkbox it is. Is that what it was called? It was in this check mark. So what I'm going to do is we'll bring up the file that has the week view on it. So that's going to be week schedules? I don't know. Nah, that's not right. That's like a specific include tab. So let's search for week schedules. Week schedules. And see what file it's brought in on. The app HTML. I forgot I really need to like rename this template, and I haven't. So this app, once upon a time, I was going to name this route. I think today it's called dashboard. Before I selected my domain name, I was going to call it app, like you lived in the app. But then I picked a domain name of schooldesk.app, and so having .app/app was like way overkill, but I never came back and cleaned up the template. So what I've got today is an app.html, even though it's for the dashboard, which is confusing, but hey, that's what it is. We've got the print link here. So that's something I want to use. I'm just going to set them side by side and see how that works. Okay, they are clearly not meant to be side by side. So we're going to have to put this in some kind of container. Let's inspect it, see what markup is there. And then we'll check on the actual HTML in a bit. So this is it's just part of the container. this is a div, and this is a div. So I think we need to wrap the print thing in a box. So we're going to do this. We'll say div, and this is going to be a flex box. So we want flex, and the default is already a row. So I don't think we even need to say anything else. And then we'll end this like this, and then we'll move these two in here. And by doing that, we'll probably need some other attributes in a minute, but by doing this much, we should have the two next to each other. Good. The problem is, like, look at the spacing between them. So there's a gap that's needed. So we can solve that in a couple of ways. I don't really want to mess too much with the link itself. So since this is like the positioning of where are these buttons going to be on this page, and it's not about the button itself, I think what I want to do instead is wrap these in another div and give that div the margin or padding. So we'll say M2, and we'll end it with a div, closing div tag, move that in, and then duplicate these 3 lines. So now we've got some gap between there, and there's a lot of ways we could do this. So, you know, in case you're wondering, like, well, why didn't you use this such and such feature of flex? Like, I don't care. This is a way that will work for me. The other thing I want about this is that I don't think I want, what that did is actually pushed some vertical spacing, and it made this more spaced out feeling than I want. It might have been subtle, but like I noticed that there's now a bigger gap here. And so what we'll do is set this to be MX to constrain the margin to the horizontal dimension. Whoops. And by doing that, it should take out the vertical margin that we just added. It wasn't a big change, but it was enough. Okay, so now what I'm after is we'll call this teacher checklist. Teacher checklist. Actually, it's important to call it the link so that it's not, I might have a teacher checklist template later, so I don't want to mix those up. And then, gosh, is that really at the top? That seems wrong. Print link. I probably have it on multiple pages. Yeah, because I could use this in a lot of places because I'm using the JavaScript window print function. So it makes sense to kind of this to be a globally available template. But for my checklist, that doesn't make any sense. In fact, I should probably think about where is this checklist going to live. The default answer based on the page that I'm currently on is this app view, this dashboard view is one of my core pages. But this checklist feature doesn't feel like a core feature to me. I have a couple pages in the core, and it's just pages where like they are a collection of a bunch of stuff. So I'm thinking that it might be better served if the checklist goes somewhere else. And the question is, like, what does that checklist become? Like, what are the parameters to it? Well, let's maybe think through this a bit. So we've got, all right, I broke that. Hold on. Let's comment this out for a minute. Maybe I'll see this. So one of my core views here is this weekly, and then I switch it to using this date syntax of 22/6/19, which is the first day of each week. And I think I've set the week to be Sundays. That was my customer's preference, and so that's just, it's a fixed thing. Sunday, it's always the Sunday. But I think for a checklist, I think it will make sense to always be to a particular week. Like we can follow this pattern. And a checklist is for what? It's for the school year. So we can say, because she wants to see it for the whole school year. This week view is for a particular school year, and it's for a particular week. So it probably makes sense for this to be a school year. What would the URL be? Let's sketch it out. I think I want a URL that will ultimately look like, I'll just put it right here for a moment. I have school years in the app or something like this. And then I can put the school year ID here. And then we could do, it's not a problem to be explicit, teacher checklist. And then we could do the date. Now let me think through if this is going to hold up to scrutiny. There are some ways that you could mess this up, I think. For instance, if someone had a teacher checklist and then they changed the start and end date of their school year, and then the checklist no longer corresponds to that. But that's possible today with a regular school year. Like if I go over here and this school year didn't start before June 1st. So if I go back, eventually, yeah, you'll see there's logic here that I programmed to recognize that you're not actually in the school year right now. So the week view doesn't show any of that information. We can put that same kind of logic into the checklist if we want to, so that it will only show a checklist for a school year that happens to be running at that week. In fact, if that's the case, I'm trying to think if I can look. This is probably easiest if we take the school year out of this. Like, there's a constraint on the system, and that constraint is that school years cannot overlap. So if we have a teacher checklist that is for a particular week starting, we can look in that list, or we can do a lookup based on the date of the week and say, hey, you know what? This is only for the 2022 school year. So we're only going to show something for that. And if we do that, that takes out this requirement of having a school year listed in the URL, which gives us this nicer, shorter checklist option. So I feel like that feels kind of nice, actually. So the question then becomes, where does this live? Where does this live? Maybe it's time to make a new Django app. Yeah. Because what if I changed it to this? Teachers checklist 2022. And then we might even have like a weekly checklist or something. But I can leave it as checklist for now. This is starting to take shape. All right. Why do I think this is a good idea? It starts to give a home for teachers. The teacher right now is the user. There's only one area. Only a single teacher is like the person who's logged in is assumed to be the teacher for the application. Maybe that would change in the future. No plans to change it right now. But so far in the application, I haven't had any real reason to have anything specific for teachers. The focus has entirely been on school years and schools and courses and classes and students. It's all been about them. So now that this is a tool specifically for a teacher, it probably makes sense to have a teacher's app, because we have a student's app, we have a school's app, reports. I mean, you can see some of them here. Teachers might make sense. Hello, blah, blah. Let me read your question here. Django Defender. Wow, you know what? I don't even know what Django Defender is. So let's take a look. That was a good Django question. I've never heard of it before. Sounds cool. Defender sounds neat. So let's see. Django Defender, what are you? Ah, okay. I do not do this right now. If it's about protecting from login attempts, no, I don't do that. Let me go read more here. A simple, super fast Django reusable app that blocks people from brute forcing login attempts. Wow, sounds cool. I don't do that, but I do use yeah, brute force protection. I get you. I do use Django All-Auth. That is my login scheme. Django All-Auth. It's pretty awesome for handling different modes of logging in, whether that's using some kind of social sign-on. I used it in my particular app because Django's default login system uses usernames and passwords, and I wanted to do email only. I didn't want to mess with usernames. I don't know if All-Auth has some kind of brute force protection. That's a really good question. So I'm in the dark on this one. I have this vague suspicion that it does. I read the documentation for this a really long time ago, and it might be in here in the configuration somewhere, but yeah. So here, I'll drop this page for you to inspect, and you can tell me if there's some setting there that looks like brute force controls. No, I'm joking. You don't actually have to do that, but this is what I would use. And if the settings in here, maybe I turned it on, maybe I didn't, maybe I left it as like something I could do later. But there's a lot of options in there, and I don't remember them all. So hopefully that answers your question, blah, blah. All right, so let's return to the thinking about the URLs. So if we give a home for teachers to have some kind of views that are specific to them, I suppose that could open up future possibilities of other kinds of features that they are looking for managing their own stuff. I don't know how much I would support there, but I didn't think I'd be supporting a checklist either. So I'm definitely open to the possibility of it. And what I want, importantly, is a good place for this to live. As I'm looking through my list of applications, that's all of these directories aside from the PyCache one, none of those feel like a good home for a checklist. I mean, I guess maybe you could argue accounts, but I think of accounts as more like user management and resetting passwords and all of that kind of stuff. So that doesn't feel like a good fit. So this is feeling better and better, which means that I think that the right place for this template, this link thing that we haven't built yet, is in a directory for an app that we're not using yet, which is okay. We'll get it going. So let's go ahead and create that directory. We'll have a new teachers directory. And this is not a Django app yet, just to be clear. I'm in the templates section of my app because I prefer keeping all of my templates kind of gathered in one place so I can easily peruse my HTML files. and then I kind of repeat some of the structure from the Django apps that I have. So I'm using the exact same name for the thing I'm going for. So let's create the file of what I call this checklist link, I think I said was going to be the name. And we'll write that file, and then we'll come down here, we'll go back to the core app place, we'll uncomment this thing, and then we'll change this to be that. And just so we can see something in the template, we'll put in hello. So if we return to the week, now we've got this hello text. Cool, new button. All right, now we have a home for our button. Let's go fill it with some stuff and make it look like the actual user interface that we want. So we're going to come down here. I think we're done with this for the moment. And we can say, let's go back to the print. Let's take all of that content, drop it there, get rid of the hello. So now we should have like our print and our print, right? We're duplicating content, but we're about to change it. And then we'll change this to be teacher checklist. Let me make sure I'm not editing the print one. We've got our teacher checklist. That name looks long, but I'll keep it for now. And we want the check mark icon, right? So let's do a split. Go back to the Zondicons directory, which was in my downloads. And we'll open that up and look for check mark. Here's check mark. And so this is the SVG. So I'm going to take the SVG of the check mark and drop it here. Now, in order to make it fit and have all the colors and all that stuff that I want, I have to take all of these CSS classes that are here, and we will put those right there. And then I think, what's left? So let's get rid of that. We need to have, we can also get rid of the path. Now the checkmark has a very simple path. That's pretty cool. We'll go to the end and delete this closing SVG tag so we don't have two of them. I suppose we can also do that. Give the path node its own line there. Not that it matters, but we're going to be complete. So cool. I'm going to turn off my flux right now because I've got yellow with yellow buttons and can't actually see what this looks like. Wow, that got a lot brighter. All right, that feels good. Again, the name is a little long, but we don't have a lot of buttons here, so I'm okay burning some real estate to make that button go. So the next thing we need to do is make it so it's not this. We don't want to print. We want to, for the moment, since we don't have a link anywhere, let's just make it an anchor tag link so it will still appear. And you can see it's got the hash mark. So we can click it. It doesn't go anywhere now, but it behaves like a proper link. Okay. That feels right. I think we're ready to move on to the next thing. The next thing in my mind is having a destination. Not a destination with any data, but a destination. Actually, pause. There's one more thing. One more thing, yeah. So let's go back to the app for a moment. And importantly, this feature is not ready for anybody yet, but I still want the ability to deploy a new version of my code. So we need a feature flag that is going to gate the ability to see this feature or not. So at the top, we can come up here and we can say, oh man, is it waffle flags or waffle tags? I was going to get it totally wrong. So at the end of this load, we'll add waffle tags. And what that's going to do is bring in the template tags for my library that it does feature flags. Feature flags give me, if you've never worked with them before, it gives you the ability to dynamically turn something on and off on a real site. It does that by having some state in a database table that says it's on or it's off, and then you can go in and adjust it. Blah, blah, blah. That was really generous of you. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful. And so feature flags are a great feature for controlling what your users see or don't see. But the really beneficial part about feature flags is that they allow you to like constantly be shipping out changes to your code. There are a couple ways to think about this. And the way that I've encouraged my companies that I've worked for to do is to try and make small incremental changes as fast as you can and get them out there. So in order to do that, they have to be safe. So feature flags enable you to do this safely. If you didn't take this approach, the other way you would have to do a feature is you would create it in some branch or whatever version control system, put it somewhere else, and then work on it until it's all polished and ready to go, and then merge it back into your main code base, and then deploy that. And then that moment that you actually put it on your servers is the moment that it goes live. And that works, but there's a big downside. You have the language to latch onto is deploy and release. They're two different concepts in web development. Deploy and release. Deployment is the idea of putting the software, putting the bits of code onto your live production environment. Release is making that code available to the users of your site. So if you've adopted that first model the model I was describing, where you're working on the feature on the side, and then you merge it into your code base, and then you deploy that deploy and release happens at that same moment. You've lost all control about when your users see it. So that's fine if your code was perfect. But how often is your code perfect? And I know my code, and my code is not often that perfect. So what that leaves you with is a scramble. If you didn't have a good release and you put this code out there and it immediately goes live to your users, but it's broken, your only option is to roll back your code changes. And maybe there were a bunch of code changes. Maybe there's like, you're not just working by yourself, but you're working on a team. And so you have, Johnny and Susie's like code changes in with your stuff. And now you have to figure out, well, is it safe to bring back those changes too, or not? So by having a feature flag, you get this power to always be pushing your code out, even if it's not ready yet. And the benefit of that is you can have the flag off and your users never see it. So the flag decouples the deployment time from the release time. It's a really powerful concept, which is why I'm kind of camping on it for a second. It's something to know about and be aware of. So, in fact, the way I've approached this is probably not right at the start. So I went in here and I modified this template and added a bunch of stuff. But really what I should have done is, and we'll come back and fix this so it looks like what I should have done. We're going to use this template tag from this Waffle library, which is a Django version of doing feature flags using a database table. It's a really powerful library. And so we're going to create a new flag section. And so the tag that you've got is flag, and then you give it the flag name. So we'll call this teacher checklist flag. And then we'll have an end flag to match with it. So there's two states that go with this, and one is with it on, and then the other is with it off. And so we have our state when it's off is the state of the code as it is today, which is to say only a print button. So none of this extra flex stuff that we did, all of that stuff is new, right? So we only want to show the print button on this page, when the flag is off. You can configure Waffle. Actually, let's go take a look at it for a second. So there's the settings of my app, and I've got Waffle in here somewhere. So here's Django Waffle. One of the settings for Waffle is to tell it what to do when it encounters a feature flag that it's never seen before. And I think that its defaults to do nothing, basically, but I find that for managing my flags, if the code is going to find a flag that it's never seen before, it means that it's something that I recently added. And it means that it's something that I'm wanting to turn on at some point in the future. So this particular setting, Waffle create missing flags, will create a new row in the flag table because it's seeing this thing, and then it will give you the control to go look at it later. So now that I have added this with teacher checklist flag, let's go refresh the page. Actually, let's do a step before that, just so you can believe me. So we're gonna go to the admin. Go to the admin, and then we've got here's where our flags are. Notice, I guess getting back at those settings, I defined a custom flag. There's the possibility to change flags and add your own particular behavior. And you got to do that early in the project if you want to use that before you add the library. So this is like if you ever use the abstract user that's available from Django and you want to customize the Django user, it's the same concept. So if I decided that I needed extra features out of my flag library, I want that flexibility, which is why I did this. You can use the default flag as well if you don't think you're going to do anything fancy, but this just gives me more control in case I need it in the future. So that's why I have the flag model here. Anyway, the net effect of that is that my flag controls are in the core app rather than in Django Waffle if you're using the default. And you can see I've got a bunch of flags in here already. This is my test data, which I've never cleaned up. A bunch of these could probably be removed. So observe, though, that teacher checklist flag is not in here. Okay? So now that you've seen that, and now that I have confirming I've saved the change, we're going to refresh the page. The teacher checklist flag, or the teacher checklist button there, should go away. It did. And I also noticed while I was doing that a kind of a regression that I have in this, and that is that when we turn this back on, I want the left margin to be 0. So really what I'm really after is just margin right. If I don't care about both sides of the X, I want that to be right. Okay. That's something I just happened to notice as we were refreshing this. There's another benefit of flags. So we'll come back to this page, refresh, and look, now we have the teacher checklist flag. The default state for a flag, if it's auto-created, is going to be off, which makes sense. Like if you're creating pushing out new code, and immediately your users start hitting that new code, and they encounter this new flag, the worst thing you could want is for that flag to be auto-created and auto-turned on. That would indicate that, again, that coming back to deploy and release as concepts, that would be merging those two things together at the same time. So this is now, as if we deployed this, the flag gets created, and so when it's time to turn it on in the real site, what I would do is this. I would come into this admin page and come over to here, to this everyone option, and say yes. And that will, if we go back and hit save, you'll now see it's checked. So let's talk a little bit more about what's in Waffle just for a second, because it's cool. What if you're not sure if you want to roll it out to everybody? There is an ability to have flags only be conditionally applied to certain users. So the flag system is aware of users, and if you come back in here and switch this from, so yes just means like 100% on, everybody's getting the same experience. But if you set it to unknown, it's going to go drop down to the next set of options. and it's going to look for these other ways to do this. So by default, the flag will be on for super users, which should really only be like a single account in your system, ideally. You can have staff users that could have it, or you could get it down to authenticated users. But notably, you can have groups. So it integrates with Django's group system. It also has specific users. So if you want to turn it on, like maybe you have found a potential solution to a problem that some particular user has reported, but you're not confident that it'll work for everybody. So maybe you come in here and you add in your user and you find, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a random one, email 7 here. And so now this flag would be on because I've set this to unknown and I've got a user ID in here. This now, if the user with email 7 was to log into the site and check it out, they would see this flag, but nobody else would. So that's super powerful too. It doesn't have to be a binary of is the feature on or off. It's now a spectrum depending on your needs, which is really cool. I don't need any of that control right now, so I'm going to turn it on for everybody. And now that it's on for everybody, we should be able to come over here. And if I refresh, we're going to see the checklist button pop back. And notably, the print button stayed where it was. So we fixed that problem where it was a little nudged to the right. Okay. So that's feature flags, super powerful. We're going to use them in other ways as well, most likely. I think that's the extent, the entirety of the changes that are required for, well, as I say that may be wrong. That may be wrong. Our template is probably going to need some other data. So notice up here, yeah, Mirage, yes, I totally agree. Django Waffle is super cool. There are also like pay services you can use. Like at work, we have a service called Launch Darkly. It's a very expensive, like enterprisey kind of service though. So, it's not something I can recommend to a casual user. But I find that Django Waffle works perfect for my little project here. It's a really great tool, especially if you're in the Django ecosystem. It puts your flags in a database table and is pretty dead simple. So visually, I think that this page is done. There's going to be the ability to check this button and it will take you to a link. And we've got the HTML fragment to do that. I think we're missing something though. And the thing that we're missing is that sometimes, like notice right now it says dashboard, but sometimes it's going to be week. Have a certain week in here with a number. And we actually want the teacher checklist to match the number of the week that you're on. So if this is, the next week, I want the checklist to be for that next week. I don't want to show, the same thing. So I'm going to have to be able to change that list. And the only way that we're going to do that is by having dates be passed into this template fragment. Okay. Now we can do that implicitly, or we can do it explicitly. The mere fact that this template include is on this page, I believe will mean that the date information will just be available to the template. And then we can just start using that as whatever variable name it is. But I don't want to do that. What I'd rather do is up here, you see we've got next week, date, year, etc. Well, shoot, hold on. First day is the thing that we're after. That's the bit of context that we want to be able to pass in. So first day is a date time object. Oh, shoot, I don't remember. Let's go to the view. First day. So week object The week object is in core schedules. Apologies, it's been a while since I looked in here. Oh, Matt, you didn't type. I didn't add the type information, so I can't see that right away. So is that a date? Probably. Especially the fact that I use the word day. I would have said like date time if it was a full date time. But I don't know that for certain. Let's see how I'm using week. And then we're going to go annotate this because that's annoying. It's a date. Okay. Right. Gosh. I have grown to be so accustomed to type annotations that when I see this code that's like, well, I can't at a glance know what this is anymore. Now I'm getting frustrated. Not like super frustrated, but it's just like, okay, this would just have been easier if I didn't have to guess. If it just had date on here, that would have been way easier. And since we know this is returning a date, let's go ahead and do that. Let's add in date, datetime.date. And then today should also be a date. So this should help in the future. And it also has the benefit of I'm using MyPy, which is a type checker. And it makes MyPy more powerful if it knows actual type information. So if I ever was to call getDate and pass in a date time or something like that, or getDay and pass in a date time, then it would call me out and say like, hey, you actually can't do that because that's not what the function expects. So this declares my intent there, which I should have done all along. Okay, so knowing that first day is a date object, we should be able to come down to this checklist and pass in the information that we want. And that should be, that needs to be the same 3 parameters to build any of those links, which is going to be the year, which will be first day dot year, the month, which is first day dot month, and the day, right? Because that's the 3 pieces that we need, which is first day dot date. All right. Oh, shoot. It might be day. Python date time. Date. There's a date object in here. There's the date time object. Year, month, day. Yeah, okay. So not date, day. That looks weird to say first day dot day, but whatever, that's what it is. Okay, so that gives us the pieces of info that we need for that template so that when we go build the URL later, we'll always have those available. And this is actually wrong. You need to have the keyword with in the syntax there. Also, apparently I have the word and there, which was not correct. So with. All right, let's refresh the page to make sure that that's working. Not going to do anything with that information yet, but it's now available. In fact, to prove that it's available, let's print it out. Let's go to our template, and that's the teacher's checklist link. And now we can put in, so because we used that with syntax and gave it the names year, month, and day, like that's what's going to be available inside of here. So we can say year, month, and day. We should see whatever's there at that time. That's what we're going to use for the URL to build that up. So 22/6/19. And that should change. If we go to a previous week, it's going to show whatever the first day is. It's going to help us build our links, which are going to map to the weeks that we need. We're going to use the same URL, the same dates for our weeks, and so that's all good. So I think we're ready to, maybe to round out this stream for the night is, let's build the teacher's app. Let's create the teacher's, the checklist view. We're not going to create the template itself. We'll get, I want to get a couple of tests on it to make sure it works. I want to get a rendering template that is nothing, but it will work. I want to get the URL that's going to have all of the parameters that we need. Yeah, I think that will be a good round set of information to cover. And then in the following streams, we can actually start populating that template with data that we'll have to get from somewhere. So that'll be interesting we'll have to reuse data that's available in that dashboard view. I don't know that it's super well designed to be reusable everywhere, so we might have to do some refactoring there. But all that's okay. So we need to stop the server for a minute, and we're going to create a new app. Okay. So to create an app that we'll now add, I'm going to use start app, and I'm going to give it the name teachers. And that's what it's going to do is put a teachers directory right in the root, which is not where I want it. And there are probably other ways to do this, but this is just the most convenient way that I find. So the teachers directory is a full app. It's totally ready to go. But I want all of my apps, all of my Django apps to live in the homeschool directory, which is where most of my Python code is for this project. So we're going to move teachers to homeschool. It's kind of just step one of getting the application going. The next thing here is we actually have to hook it in. A Django application, one of the nice parts about Django is that you have control over what gets loaded or not loaded into your application. That's managed by your settings and the installed apps setting. So what we need to do is probably a couple things, but we'll first go to the settings area and go to project settings and look for the installed apps. And then I list all of my apps at the bottom. That's just my choice in this. There's no rhyme or reason for that, but I like to have them. I think of it like the way that many open source packages think of how they do Python imports, where the standard library is at the top, third-party packages are in a block in the middle, and then local stuff is at the bottom. That's how I like to think about installed apps, except standard library this time is now Django. Django's the standard library in the Django context, and then all of my third-party Django apps are my block in the middle, and then my personal apps are at the bottom for my actual project. And then I alphabetize them just because that's me, and that's what I like to do. So we'll add teachers here. So that's all that's needed to incorporate the actual app, except for one small change. So if we go into another app, let's say homeschool students, and go into this apps file, you'll see it has a name. And that name here says homeschool students. But if we do the same thing in the teachers app and look at apps, it'll just say teachers. So we're going to, in order for Django to find this, and because it has to match up with the installed apps, we need to be homeschool.teachers. Okay. So that's kind of the minimum to get that going. There's a little bit of other cleanup that we have to do here to make my pre-commit checks work and so on. So we'll go through each file and I'll talk through it. So we can't have any unused imports, so I'm going to empty out this file for now since we're not using anything in here. And we already did that one. I'm going to come in here. We're not having any models yet, so we'll take out the models import for now. And the views we'll come back to in a minute. We'll just leave that one alone. The other thing I always do with my apps, I wish there was I think there's another way to use a different template, but I don't bother to set that up, is I always prefer a directory for my tests instead of a test file. The reason is I write a lot of tests. I have 100% test coverage on this project, and I want a place for all of my tests that is sensible. The patterns that I've seen in most Django projects is to have a test module that maps to the module names that you see here. So if you're testing models, you'll have a testmodels.py. If you're testing views, testviews.py, and so on. So the test file is just not granular enough. So what we do is, what I do is delete that file and then create a test directory. This needs to be a Python package, which means we need an init py file. And then, so that's there. So there's no tests here yet, but we're going to add one right now. We'll have a test for our new view that we're going to have. So we'll create one called test views. And then my test subclass comes from homeschool.test. I need to import the test case class, which will be, we're going to do a checklist view. That's what we'll call it. So I'll call this test checklist, and it will subclass from the test case. For a moment, I'll just let it pass. We'll run that. So this should do nothing, basically. So it gave me a yellow because there are no tests, but it ran. Okay. So I'm now switched over to like some bread and butter kind of stuff. So this is creating a new view. We're going to connect it to a route here in a minute. And so I want to do that with a test-driven development style because it helps me catch all the silly mistakes that I might make. What's going on there? That was weird. Next, let's bring up a different test views file because there's going to be some convenient stuff that I want to copy from. So here's a dashboard. The pattern that I always choose to have minimally is have a check for unauthenticated access to make sure that I'm adding the appropriate decorators, because I don't want anybody accessing stuff they're not supposed to access, and then do like a healthy, is it giving me an okay response of a get check 200. So let's delete that part. We don't need that. And then we need to change these to be the right thing. So ultimately, we want a URLs namespace for teachers. So we're going to call this teachers, and it will be checklist. We need, I'll leave it at that for now. That's not going to be complete, but well, it's a start. So teachers checklist. And even this much is going to fail, I believe. I was going to say, I don't know where that is. Teachers is not a registered namespace. Okay, progress. So let's look at a different namespace to see an example. So the user's app, that same app we were just in, is going to have it has a URLs patterns file. And it has this app name is what's key for setting a namespace. A namespace is a convenient way to group your URLs so that you can recycle commonly used names. So you might have an app that is for a single model concept in your project, and you want a view called list. But if you had two apps that had the name list, they're going to stomp on each other about who gets the name list. And so namespaces are a honking good idea. I believe that's Python's a part of the Zen of Python. Import this. Namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. So here's Django's way of doing namespaces for URLs, is with this app name idea. So we're going to come back to the teachers area and come to the views file just for a moment. And here we want to create a urls.py, and we need to do app name is equal to teachers. Teachers, plural. And we don't have any URL patterns yet, but we can do an empty list for the moment. And MyPy is hating on me because I don't have any type definition on there and I can't figure out what's in the list because it's empty. We'll leave that for a second. Now, this is not going to work yet. It's still broken. We still haven't hooked in. So we have the Django app as in the installed apps, but we've not actually hooked in any of our routes. So these are the URLs py file is for routes that you're going to use within your app, and you have to hook them into the application in order for Django to be aware of them, into the overall project, excuse me. So what we need to do next is we need to tell the project where are any of these routes that are going to be used by this particular app. And that is in our project URLs file. And this is where we will add the right name that we want. In fact, I don't need this comment. It's time for this thing to go. It doesn't help me. It's been there for a long time. Never cleaned it up. So you can see that this is where most of my paths are going to be for my app, for its use. I put the third-party stuff at the bottom for this one. I don't know why. I'm not really consistent on everything. But we want to have teachers. So let's do a new path. And this is going to be for our teachers. And here's the important part, is doing this include. So we will include, if I can type it correctly, homeschool.teachers.urls, and close that off. So now we've hooked in this file that we've created down here. Even though there's no paths in it yet, there's no actual views connected, it now is a registered namespace. So this test is going to fail yet again, but it should fail for a different reason. It should say that checklist is not in the namespace of teachers. Yeah. So it was able to find teachers this time, but as it was looking through that namespace, it said, hey, you don't have a view with this name. So it's time to make that. And we're going to need the views file in a minute. So let's do that. So we need a path. So first thing to do is bring from Django.urls import path. That's how you declare routes that go in this URLs pattern file. And we'll create a path, and it's going to be, what's it going to be? Checklist. But here's where we need more. We need to use year and month and day. And this is where I'm blanking out, is that you put there's a difference between Jinja, which is the other big templating language in the Python world, or one of the other ones, and Django here. So you can, in your URLs, put in parameters. And these are parameters like the year, month, day that we're going to add. And those parameters then get extracted and added to a view so that you can use that information to do whatever kinds of lookups you might need, like whether that's a database ID or something along those lines. And you can specify the type that you want those parameters to be. So I can say, I'm going to assume that it's this direction for for Django, and that it's instead of the other option is this, where you put the type first, but I think it's the type after. So Django has these ideas called converters, and so this converter here is an int converter. And so what it will do is, the URL that it gets is naturally a string. There's no like type information embedded in the HTTP spec. So it will try to parse this apart, look for a match, and turn these things into the type that's specified, in this case an integer. And the way that this works is with regex under the covers, I believe, but what happens here is if let's say you had year and you said 2000 as what somebody had in the URL, that's not going to convert into a real number because it's the spelled out word of that. So it's not going to pass that check. It won't match. So this is a way to make sure that the data that you're collecting for your view is actually the type of information you want. And in this case, I do want these to be integers. So the other thing we have to do is hook it to an actual view. And so I'm going to say views teacher checklist. This doesn't exist yet, but it will soon. And finally, we have to give the view a name so that when we reference it in templates and stuff, we can have a consistent name to attach to. That's so you aren't hard coding your URLs into your templates, because if you ever change them, then you got to go update a bunch of references. Okay, so we have this. Now we need to get the views module, which is going to do a relative import from within this app. So the views module lives right next to us. And notice now it says, I don't have this. So now it's time to actually create this view. A view is a function, minimally a function that will take a request as the first argument, and whatever parameters that you might have created in your URL route. In this case, it's going to be year, month, and day. So I'll go ahead and type annotate this, and we'll add those in a second. So we'll have year, which will be an int, month will be an int, and day will be an int. And a full proper view has to return an HTTP response, which is what the render can do. Render knows how to take a template and return a response. And we will want our template to live at teachers checklist HTML. So that's where that is, HTML. There we go. Whoops, I forgot the first argument to this. I got this wrong. Is actually the request object itself. And then the last is the context, which I don't think we'll get to tonight, but I'll go ahead and create it. So we want context is going to be type of a dictionary, and that'll get MyPy to be quiet. And then finally, our view will return an HTTP response, ultimately. So to finish off the type annotation stuff, we can go from Django, HTTP, import, HTTP request, and HTTP response. Okay, kind of blazed through that. Apologies if that was too much or too fast, but I'm hopeful that you can see that now the connection. And if we want a confirmation that I got this in the way that I want to have something reusable, there is a weekly in here, and we can see that, oh, I was going to get it wrong. So Django puts the type first. All right. I'm looking too much ginger, I guess. Okay. Yep, otherwise we're matching the weekly thing, which is good. Means we're doing it right. Okay, now, because this is expecting 3 parameters, this is actually wrong up here at this point. Like there is a view now named checklist, but the way to resolve this URL from this test library that I have it's going to expect more. This probably should still fail. Yeah. So this isn't as clear anymore. And maybe this is an improvement that Django could make in the future. It's showing you what patterns it tried. And if you have never seen regex before, regular expressions, this might be where you're scratching your head. Like, what the heck is this? So I'm not going to go into all regular expressions tonight. Just have the peace of mind knowing that it's looking for integers here. So it's essentially trying to hint at us of you created a URL, but you didn't pass in all of the arguments to fulfill this pattern. So we need to, and we can do something like that by the easy case with this unauthenticated one. It doesn't really matter. We just need to pass in 3 numbers. So we can pass in 2022. Let's just do today's date because that's easy enough. I don't have to think. All right, cool. Progress. Now, it's still failing. This is the benefit of using test-driven development in this approach, is like you know exactly what the next thing to fix is. So now we need a template. So let's go to our teachers, well, hold on. The checklist link, that'll get us in the right directory. And let's just create a file called checklist.html and save it. Now, this thing should fail, but for a different reason. Okay. Now it's failing because it's proving that our view is not safe. So what happened was the view rendered. We got a 200 response, and that seems like it's what you want normally, but it means that anybody who could access this URL could see anybody's data at this point, which is not good. What we really want is someone who is not logged in, someone who is unauthenticated, to be redirected to a 302 response, which will take them to the login page. That's what it's kind of indicating here. Not doing a great job of telling you why, though, but that's what it's doing. So what we need to come back and do is add a particular decorator to our view. And that view, or that decorator, is called login required, which I'm just going to steal from over here. So we add the decorator login required to the view, and now we've added the access control check. So I should be able to return to the test file, and hopefully at this point this first test should pass, saying you can't get in here because you're being blocked. So instead of a 200 response, it got a 302 instead, and which is the right expected behavior. Okay, for the moment, let's hard code in the date. We have to change this when we actually make this test do something real. Whoops, 15. What is? Yeah, it doesn't matter. So that one should also pass, because the difference this time is now we've created an we've created a user using a testing method that we have called makeUser, and then we're using the test case has a method on it called login, and so we can log in that user so that by the time you do the actual call with the client with this get check 200, it's doing an authenticated call. So get check 200 is a shortcut method that is doing a get request, an get HTTP request, but it's also going ahead and checking that the status code of that response is an HTTP 200 response, which is an OK, which is the normal response to get. The other way that you could do this, well, there's tons of other ways. You could switch this to be a get, and then it's going to return a response object, and you could do assert that the response status code is equal to a 200, and that should also pass. but it's slightly more verbose. So this kind of just combines them into one step for this. This is like it's called a happy path test, where you're just checking, kicking the tires. Does this thing work at all? And so let's put that back to the get check 200. So if I run this file, we've got this. All right. One more thing, and then we'll call it a night. I now have a view. I have a URL for that view, and I have a template for the link. So what we can do is connect the link template to this view that does nothing, and that will be enough. We're going to go back to that link template, and now we have here where we left this previously. We'll change this to be a URL fragment, or a URL template tag, sorry. So we say URL, and now here's where we use the namespace feature, and say teachers, and the colon is the separate the namespace from the view name, and then say checklist. We know that this particular view takes 3 integers as the arguments to build the URL, and we have those 3 integers. Those were the year, month, and day that we passed in from the previous template on the app. So doing this should complete this, so that this should work. I'm going to now delete this from the other side, and I think that should be the entirety of it. So let's return here. Let's refresh this page. Oops. I need to restart the server. Cool. Server's restarted. And we're on this weekly thing. So if anything is looking good here, then it should be the link that we should see before I even hover over it. It should be /teachers/checklist/2022/6/5/. And that's exactly what I see. If I click it, it's going to go to an empty page because we haven't done that yet, but that's okay. But it went there. It went to the right URL. If we return, let's check out the week view and not a weekly view, so the actual dashboard view, and make sure that it's still working. And it is. It's corresponding to the first day of the week, because that's what we plugged it in with. So it's going to the 12th. So this is our new chunk of UI. This is what the user is going to click. When they click it, they'll get the list view of all of these tasks. Just each course listed out, each day listed with the task next to it. And that's what the teacher will be able to scratch out or jot notes by or whatever they need to do. So that's kind of the first step of this project. And I think that's a really great stopping point for the evening. These streams, as always, are after I'm done live, they go public and are available for your review later if you want to get more out of it. Do thank you for joining in tonight. Thank you so much for the what is that, a sticker? I don't remember what the terminology is, but I really appreciate that, blah blah, if you're still around. Next time we will turn our attention to the actual template itself. We're going to try and take the data from this weekly view that's here, this dashboard view, and repackage it to fit into the teacher checklist, and that'll be our next goal. So thank you all for tuning in, and have a great evening, a great week. See you next time. Take care.